Happy Election Day, folks. I've mentioned before that I read every comment that I get on every video. I used to respond to them all too, but I'm not gonna write yet another essay beneath my Dear Evan Hansen review for the passionate haters who didn't bother to see that they aren't the first or even 15th person to tell me that I should really read the novelization because it totally justifies the actual musical's narrative failings. The way that I do these videos seems to rub a certain subset of people the wrong way. My face, my choice of subjects, the way I talk around those subjects for the first several minutes of every video. In fact, I can almost hear the clacking of some mouth breather in the comments already complaining about the fact that I haven't gotten to the point yet, as though anyone in the world cares what they think. It's sad, you know? If you don't like my video, that's fine, bro, but I get a real kick out of how offended you people get when I call you bro. But why am I talking about this? Well, because in the description of my recent review of William Friedkin's 1973 horror classic, The Exorcist, I wrote the following. If this video gains any traction, I foresee an incredibly unpleasant comment section. I had figured that some folks would take it very personally that I liked the film a lot, but also wasn't scared by it. And I was right, although clearly none of them actually watched the video. They saw the title and felt compelled to tell me about the resulting tantrum that they had. Which, whatever, clearly I'm a happier person than they are, which says terrible things about their mental states. But there was one comment in particular that encapsulated what I'm subjected to on a near daily basis, and I'm not popular, so I cannot fathom what it's like for big creators. It reads, I stopped listening at about 4 minutes. I suspect your idea of great horror is a guy with a chainsaw chasing teens around a lake. The Exorcist is all about atmosphere. The fact that you don't get this makes you the pseudo-intellectual. Also, while I'm agnostic, I'm never so snidely dismissive of the beliefs of others. For those who didn't watch the other video, first up, rude, but also the 4-minute point is where I start shit-talking people who think that if there's a horror movie released by anyone other than A24, it's bad. Clearly, he was triggered by me calling those people pseudo-intellectual and knee-jerked with the classic, I am rubber, you are glue. But it's really the second and last sentences placed together without irony that made me laugh very hard. Because, switch them. I'm never so snidely dismissive of the beliefs of others. I suspect your idea of great horror is a guy with a chainsaw chasing teens around a lake. We can all laugh at the deep hypocrisy of that statement. Also, agnostics are like vegetarians. They don't really believe in anything. Atheists actively believe in nothing, while vegans are actually committed to animal welfare. The living conditions for dairy cows and egg-laying chickens are every bit as horrendous as those raised solely for slaughter. And if you don't think it's possible to know that there's a God, how is that any different from one not existing? Stop fence-sitting. And if he had actually been paying attention to all the thumbnails I'd put up on screen earlier in the video, he'd see that I'm quite a fan of so-called elevated horror. Heck, I consider myself a straight-up A24 stan. But I'm also not the kind of douchebag who thinks I'm above the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or Friday the 13th. The Exorcist is a much better movie than Friday the 13th, but Texas Chainsaw? You want to talk atmosphere. I first watched that movie on VHS on a 17-inch CRT television at my college library with a nearby window streaming in sunlight, and I was still terrified. Yes, that is absolutely what I think of when I think of great horror. But you know what else is? The Exorcist III. Hello, by the way, and welcome to the Week Air Review. You can call me Master of Transitions, because today I am talking about William Peter Blatty's The Exorcist III, based on William Peter Blatty's novel Legion, itself based on some pre-pro work done for The Exorcist III by Williams, Peter Blatty, and Friedkin. Like me, The Exorcist III ignores the events of The Heretic and serves as a direct sequel to the original, albeit one made and set 17 years later. Long gone are Reagan and her mother, but Lieutenant William Kinderman, who had a keen interest in that case, remains. I didn't mention Kinderman previously, in part because he doesn't really have all that much to do in The Exorcist other than talk about how much he likes movies, but he's a fun presence there. And while all cops are bad, the movie makes sure to let you know that he's less bad than a lot of them by having him call out his racist colleagues as some of his first dialogue. So that's fun. Kinderman is still sad about the death of Father Damien Karras all those years ago, and every year around the time of his death, Kinderman goes to the movies with Karras's former colleague, Father Dyer, the one who cried over his dead body. But because there's a movie now, something's obviously different this time around. People start dying in some real unpleasant ways, ones that point to a serial killer who has been dead for 17 years. The Gemini killer. And it's up to Kinderman to find out what's going on. I spent a lot of time in my earlier review, possibly too much, noting how odd it was that the ancient Mesopotamian god Pazuzu had seemingly traveled to Washington, D.C. so that he could possess a 12-year-old girl. And it's something that still bothers me. You expect movies with transcontinental demonic possession to bring some mystical item to a sleepy suburb, and then, oh no, everything's bad now. Something like, Wishmaster. But The Exorcist just shows us that Pazuzu has statues in northern Iraq, but actually isn't there anymore. Why not? I don't know. The movie doesn't seem interested in the answer, so why the fuck does it open in northern Iraq? Anyways. The Exorcist III has no such issues. Pazuzu is technically still the big bad boy doing the big bad boy things, but his role here is more as facilitator than real agent. And I totally get why he would be interested in possessing a serial killer, especially one as interested in chaos as the Gemini was. His only criteria for victims was that their name began with a K. And when Gemini died, it was convenient that his spirit could be transferred to the body of our dearly departed friend, Mr. Damien Karras, as punishment for the whole exorcism thing. It's pretty dumb, but also kind of brilliant. But long before we know any of that, before we hear the Gemini killer's name or see his faces, we know we're dealing with something different. Because after a young boy is brutally murdered, an old woman shows up to confession to repent for what she did to him. But not just for him, for all the others who preceded him. But we can hear in her voice that she is not your typical octogenarian murderess. She's been possessed. And sure, old ladies getting possessed and being creepy is hardly groundbreaking stuff, but there's a reason for that. It's unnerving as heck, and this moment alone is spookier than anything in the film's predecessor. And it just keeps on being spooky. One thing I didn't mention last time around was that the finales of supernatural horror movies in particular tend to be the parts that scare me least, because they come after the mystery is over and everyone is dealing with the monster in full force. Like, The Autopsy of Jane Doe is an excellent horror film, but where I was literally watching the first 3/4 through slits in my fingers, those last 20 minutes were just kind of whatever. While Jane Doe's secrets are being uncovered, it is a straight up masterclass in tension building. But once we understand what's going on, I was able to relax, even if the characters are freaking the fuck out. And that was how I felt through all of The Exorcist. Its horror takes place in that space usually reserved for the end, where we have all of the information about the evil and its capabilities. Of course, the film totally works on a dramatic level, though I'm not convinced it wouldn't work as well if early on we were trying to figure out alongside the doctors and Karras if the whole thing was actually real. But on a scary one? Nah, it's just a little girl invaded by an ancient Mesopotamian god who calls himself Captain Howdy. Whatever. The Exorcist III is much more effective in its horror because of the mystery, though, to be fair, it doesn't go out of its way to be mysterious. It's just an inevitable result of the whole Legion thing. As I said, we know very early on that there's possession happening and that at least one old lady is involved. And then the film uses a heck ton of exposition to explain what is happening, how, and why. This is delivered through monologues delivered straight to camera by the Gemini killer himself, and Brad Dourif makes scenes that any screenwriting professor would fail their first-year students for writing into something genuinely sinister. Seriously, he is excellent in this. But the Gemini is locked in a cell. He can't actually hurt anyone. And as much as he's going to tell us, he won't say who he'll be hopping into next. This results in a pervasive sense of paranoia because you know that the Legion is bigger than you've seen, but you don't know how big it's gotten or who's a part of it. Is that person acting weird because they're weird, or because they're going to go cut someone's head off with giant shears? Because when Gemini's involved, folks sure do like cutting heads off with giant shears. But that's never something we actually see. Indeed, despite following a serial killer, The Exorcist III is pretty restrained in its depictions of violence. The grisliest stuff happens off screen, and there are times we only see the aftermath from the trauma inflicted on those who are there. It gives a surprising sense of weight to what's going on, while also making the scenes where Blatty's VFX department was given free rein more impactful. Because, yes, they get the chance to flex their muscles. And one moment in particular got a verbal reaction out of me, something The Exorcist never did. It must have been a lot of fun to be on that team, and really on anyone related to the production design, because this movie is chock full of weird shit in the best way. It's got this very specific, very 90s atmosphere to it. Everything's just slightly off kilter. The people, the locations, the camera work. Friedkin was trying to tell a true-ish story, and so was more concerned with substance than style, but Blatty flipped the script. And as someone who is on record for his preferences about that debate, I will admit that that gave the third a pretty strong leg up in the comparison here. And sure, they are such different films with such different intents that it's not fair to compare them in the same way you can't reasonably compare the Texas Chainsaw Massacre to its sequel or The Various Evils Dead. But also, this is my YouTube channel, and I can do what I want. 8.8 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, and thank you particularly to my patrons, my mom, Hamry and Marco, Kat Saracata, Benjamin Schiff, Anthony Cole, Magnolia Denton, Elliot Fowler, Greg Lucina, and Werner von Alphen, who should really tell me how to actually say his name properly. If you like this video, that's great. If not, I don't care. If you'd like to see more, please subscribe. I hope to see you in the next one.